Hi, my name is Gina Strauss and I'm a licensed professional counselor. And this video is about one of the thinking patterns that a lot of us humans have that can cause a lot of stress and anxiety in our lives. So we humans have brains that are wired for survival. Ever since our early human days, we've had this function in our brain, this structure and this function in our brain that have helped us to survive and make it through some very harrowing physical experiences. And so that piece of our brain, that structure, that function of our brain is still there, even though we have evolved, into other things as well. And so one of the thought patterns that we still have because of this wiring for survival is called worst case scenario thinking, also called catastrophic thinking, also called blowing things up. And, imagine this. Imagine you were a student about to take a big test and your worst case scenario thinking starts coming out. I'm going to fail this test. I'm not going to get an A in this test. I'm not going to pass this class. And we just start going down that road. That's one example of catastrophic thinking. Let's say like me, I'm working through a little bit of a fear of flying. And so my worst case scenario when I get on a plane sometimes, many times, but I'm much more aware of it now, is the plane's going to crash, right? And so I go right to that as opposed to any other kind of thinking. Another example would be, a lot of the young people in my family are moving into college, moving into careers, and it's the catastrophic thinking that what if I get this degree and I get into this work and either I hate it or I bomb, right? I don't do a good job. It doesn't work out. I don't make it, right? And so that is examples of catastrophic thinking. And so even though, our brain is thinking, hey, I'm helping you out here, I'm trying to serve you, really, though in those situations, we don't need to be fighting for our survival. And so here, some of the things that we can do to help us when we find this kind of thinking happening, when we can be aware. Now that's our first thing to do is to become aware. And then this next thing to do is to really look for evidence of the truth of that statement, right? So for me, flying, I've done a lot of research on flying planes. I've listened to pilots speak of just, how does flight work, right? And that turbulence is actually really a natural part of flying because for a lot of different reasons. So I don't need to go into right now. So finding evidence, getting information. So it can come from outside sources of like a little reality check here. That's it, flying is one of the safest forms of travel. And it can come from an internal sources. Like, what? When I studied for that test and I did the best that I could and I didn't get that grade that I wanted, like it was okay. I was able to pull my grade up in other areas or, really in thinking about it, it wasn't the end of the world, right? And so when we say, I made it through that success, even the example of a young person in college and in careers, well, what if I totally bomb in that career? What if I can't get a job, right? Well, I'm sure if you talk to people that are a little bit older than you, you'll hear many, many, many stories of that. Like, I'm not even using my degree that I got, or yeah, I totally bombed. It was totally not what I thought. Many different scenarios, and it brought me into a whole nother career that I'm so happy with, right? So, that worst case scenario that life will be over if this happens, you can start to find evidence from information, resources from other people, and from looking back at your past successes. I thought that worst case scenario before, but I made it through and it was actually okay. And that really didn't happen. And then another thing to do is to ask yourself the question, will this be important in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, right? So this big thing that I'm really worried about, worst case scenario, going to happen, if it does happen, is this going to be something that is really going to affect me in 10 years, in 5 years, in 2 years? And then one final thing that I find really helpful too is to talk to that part of you that still has this thought pattern, this worst case scenario, this blowing up of things, to say, hey, thanks for protecting me, doing your job and trying to protect me. But I actually realize that, that when planes have turbulence, it's almost like a boat riding in water, And so I don't need to worry about that. It doesn't mean the plane is going to crash. Thank you for alerting me to that. But now I know better in realizing and listening to my evidence and getting the research and the information that is not going to happen. The chances of that happening are very, very low. Yeah. And so when we can talk ourselves through to really finding evidence, more times than not, we're going to realize that worst case scenario is not going to happen. And that can help us move through that, those times when we're using that. So I hope this video was helpful. Apparently a bird in my yard, I wanted to add his or her 2 cents into that. And please look for my other videos on other kinds of thinking patterns and how you can, what tools you can use to navigate through them a little bit easier.